Well, it's not often you come across an article like this. This one comes to us from Entertainment Weekly. And it is, of course, about Amazon's The Rings of Power. The title is Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power Review. Amazon's prequel is kind of a catastrophe. Give this appendix an appendectomy. Oh, look how perfect it is. There's Soapy and Betty looking at us longingly with the flaming hot Cheeto dust in her hair, flashing leg like she's a sex machine, a dwarven, unbearded sex machine. It starts out talk about the movies and about Morfydd Clark and J.R.R. Tolkien and their impression of what J.R.R. Tolkien intended for Gladriel, and about how Kate Blanchett played Gladriel as a Vulcan witch for justice. You know, sometimes I don't know what to say. A Vulcan witch for justice. I don't understand that. So the two Prime videos debuting this Friday. Is it though? Is it Friday? Yeah, I think it's Friday. Soldiers her up to kick off vengeance. This, of course, is set in what Payne and McKay have written to be their second age. This is not Tolkien. These are not Tolkien's characters. Keep in mind, there are 24 made-up characters in here for the purposes of presentation and CW level drama. Much like Kate Blanchett did in Peter Jackson's initial The Fellowship of the Ring, they're having their not Gladriel Morfydd Clark narrate a history lesson prologue. Of course, we have a gender-swapped Frodo, who even looks like Elijah Wood's Frodo. Nori Brandyfoot is there. And Harfoot's journey begins with the arrival of a bearded outside one, Daniel Wayman. Obvious reference points do this show no justice. This is about as honest as a review as I think we're going to get and I have seen so far. But the article goes on to say, in Fellowship, Peter Jackson cranked up a trip to underground Moria in cinematic horror action comedy rock opera. When an equivalent setting is applied here in The Rings of Power, it's big, bright, and bland. It is there where a dwarf complains to an elf, "You missed my wedding." The mood is stilted and dull. They essentially ride an elevator. So it's a talking about feelings in elevators in Moria. Despite all of the streaming war headlines, this series is nothing like HBO's concurrent Game of Thrones spin-off. House of the Dragon is a family drama plus dragons. According to this article, the two Rings of Power episodes that the reviewers saw feel more like an 8-hour Infinity War, with disparate goods coalescing toward a big bad. The one thread that feels new concerns, yes, you guessed it, the made-up character of Arondir and the made-up character of Bronwyn, who played star-crossed lovers in a disputed land. So Arondir is apparently an elf patrolling unruly humans who call him nasty names. He's an elf patrolling unruly humans who call him nasty names like knife ears. Boy, a little on the nose with the casting and representation, huh? And then, of course, we have Bronwyn. Remember, she is the self-proclaimed activist actress who is talking about the plight of Iranian women while doing nothing about it and being in Los Angeles and the UK making this show. She's a single mom whose sweet chats with Knife Ears Arondir cause a social ruckus. Of course, the tensions are generational. Those terrible Gen X and baby boomer humans are calling diverse representational made-up character Arondir knife ears. But Arondir remembers when the locals fought for the evil. Bronwyn's fellow villagers despise the occupying force left over from a conflict no human remembers. How much more do you need to hear about the show before you really understand what Payne and McKay did with this? It is basic bitch. It is on the nose. It is incredibly predictable. And I think, to me, just reading this review, I don't want to use the word saying vindicated because I was pretty sure it was going to be like this. What I am always shocked by is the infantile level of that representation, diversity, forced agenda, and CW level soap opera bullshit. Even the article says, I don't think Tolkien intended elves to be a tad fascist. The Rings of Power casually diversifies its fictional races, a casting decision that's thankfully normal in contemporary fantasy. Is it? Is it though? Does it always work? Is that what it's all about? Is modernizing things? Again, you're talking about a fantasy world with wizards and dragons and elves and dwarves. We do not need to see ourselves in that. We need to see what the author intended. This is the interesting part. Unlike, say, House of the Dragon, this series also briefly takes fantasy world racism seriously. The humans don't like Arondir. The Harfoots fear everyone else. What have elves ever done for you? Gladriel asks Jerky Hellbrand, a human running from a brutal past. You know, again, basic bitch, on the nose, insultingly stupid. Just as bad as I think we feared it would be, and worse in ways that we have yet to see because we haven't seen the episode. Foregrounding interspecies anxiety is certainly new to Middle-earth. Yeah, it is. You know why? Because this is the shitty story that only Payne and McKay could write. This has nothing to do with Tolkien, with Middle-earth, with the characters we know. The article goes on, violent forces converge quickly around Arondir and Bronwyn, which means these actors get one flirty scene before the action ramps up. There may be bigger problems to worry about than, say, interpersonal relations. People keep finding a strange, scary sigil, so congratulations, Rings of Power writers, you brought Sauron to television and made him into a TV serial killer. They made Sauron a TV serial killer. Basic bitch, basic bitch. The article asks, what do we want from the Lord of the Rings now? Well, I think we've got it. Christopher Tolkien finished off the works of his father. We have individuals like Tom Shippey, actual scholars, you know, the horrible patriarchy, people that earned their right to actually be a scholar through hard work and the meritocracy, as opposed to clingers-on, opportunists, and Marxists from the University of Glasgow, like that Maldonado woman, who is not a scholar. What do we want from the Lord of the Rings now? You'd think a new tale would want to explore less cornered travels of Tolkien's wide, unguarded lands, and the Rings of Power does conjure elves' previously unseen homeland Valinor, but in embarrassing ways. I'm going to read that sentence again. The Rings of Power does conjure the elves' previously unseen homeland Valinor into embarrassing ways. First, it's a babbling brook where cute kids frolic. That must be the scene where poor little Gladriel is bullied by her brothers because men bad. Then it's a heavenly light ray pouring out of parting clouds. The latter is almost a Monty Python-like special effect. This article is hysterical. So now you're saying the ridiculousness of Amazon's The Rings of Power has reached Monty Python levels of special effects. Fantastic. All of this is before one person decides, against the furthest stretch of fantasy logic, to swim across an ocean. Payne McKay. I have to laugh or I cry. The article goes on, the first 2 hours stick to a seen it before places in boring situations. Rising politician Elrond starts prepping a long-winded industrial project which require a workforce greater than any assembled. The article is what I was going to say. Tolkien's saga was that of anti-industrialization. Tolkien talked about his disdain and disgust and mistrust of the machine. Christopher Tolkien gave interviews where he talked about the machine and about this industrialization and the machine that took away individual dignity, individual fantasy, individual perspectives. And here we go, Amazon making it into some great collectivist communist work projects, which requires people to sacrifice. Boy, that looks pretty 2022, doesn't it? The article goes on and says some characters seem teleport far distances while others walk slowly between villages despite like horses existing. There's a big sea attack that looks unfinished. That introduces a massive threat that's quickly forgotten. Where have you seen this before? Oh, yeah, if you've watched The Wheel of Time, you understand the concept of big buildup, no real threat, no payoff. Oh, well, forget it. We warned about this in The Wheel of Time. We did. Here we are. I'm not going to say that we were right. I haven't seen this episode, but I can tell you this, we were not wrong. The article says director J.A. Bayona finds isolated moments of grandeur, but the helicopter shots get repetitive fast. The fights aren't quite up to the Walking Dead level, and the battles won't make any crab feeders nervous. That's a reference to the House of the Dragon. Frequent cuts to an explanatory map are more funny than informative. Amazon made only 2 episodes available to critics. The article says maybe things pick up. New locations could feel less like, now that's what I call Middle Earth karaoke. Owain Arthur and Sophia Nomvetti have a sitcom couple spark as Moria marrieds. That's what you wanted in Tolkien. A sitcom spark with Sophie Nomvetti being the very first Black person ever to be in a movie, if I remember the marketing materials correctly. Morfydd Clark's rising star imports the film's obsessive mania to her role, which mainly constitutes to a kind of random encounter duels that you would have experienced in Final Fantasy. Other characters are so lame that the author was rooting for the orcs. The article ends on what I think is the summary of all summaries of what we're going to see from this show. Viewers hungry for Middle-earth anything could be satisfied. And I guess you could argue Rings of Power is no worse than all the other expensively empty genre adventures. Altered Carbon, anyone? I would say for season 2. That have proliferated through the streaming era. But this series is a special catastrophe of ruined potential, sacrificing a glorious universe's limitless possibilities at the altar of tired and true blockbuster desperation. What is the final grade on a $1 billion first episode? From Entertainment Weekly, C-. That's all from me. We're going to be doing a lot more Rings of Power coverage, including a live watch on my channel of the first 2 episodes. Is this the only honest review we're going to get before the show comes out? Tell me in the comments below. I'm Salty Texas C. You have a great day.